Morning, everybody. Brian Neubert here again from goldenblack.com. It is Tuesday, June 2nd. We are here live once again in the old home office where the magic happens. This is your goldenblack.com Daily Quarantine Simulcast for Tuesday. Once again, it is brought to you by Follett's Purdue Bookstores, Purdue Federal Credit Union, the 6th Street Dive Restaurant, First Source Bank, East End Grill, and the Charters Team Remax Ability Plus. Want to remind you, as always, if you're looking for a great dinner or to simply support our local businesses here through this very difficult time on a number of fronts these days, please keep in mind the East End Grill in downtown Lafayette, the 6th Street Dive around downtown Lafayette, Arnie's in Lafayette, West Lafayette, and all over the state, Bruno's on the Levee, Triple X on the Hill, and the Whitaker Inn out in West Lafayette, out by Harrison High School. I'm sure they would love to hear from you. I would love for them to hear from you as well. Also, if you're accessing this video via YouTube, please subscribe to our channel. Once again, there'll be stuff on there other than me eventually, and that will be reason unto itself for you to want that. Back to sports today. Late last week, Friday evening, Friday afternoon, I say evening for me because I didn't notice the email in my inbox until like 7 o'clock when it was there at 4:30. So it was sent in the afternoon, and it was found by me, nicely done. I was outside cooking hamburgers. Purdue made an announcement that we expected to be coming, obviously, about its plan for June and its return to activity. It will be a 5-week phased reintroduction, I guess you'd call it, where one team each week comes back for 5 weeks, and things start to begin happening again in terms of athletic activity at Purdue. We believe it to be football is starting up June 8th. Men's basketball is starting June 15th, and thereafter, I don't know what the order is, but it'll be women's basketball, soccer, and volleyball all will return to campus and begin, their off seasons from here. Obviously, school from an in-person sense remains out through the summer. Online classes obviously continue, but that's kind of Purdue's plan for how this is going to go. I don't know all the details on how Purdue is going to do this, what sort of restrictions are going to be in place, what sort of controls are going to be in place. I'm at some point hoping to find more answers to those questions if Purdue has all the answers yet. Obviously, there's going to be some trial and error, I'm sure, involved here to a certain extent. But just a couple of things, a couple of overarching questions that kind of, is overarching a word? Because if it's an arch, it technically goes over something. But I don't know. Anyway, a couple of things that come to mind in terms of big picture questions. The first of which is conditioning. What Purdue would have lost out on to a certain extent, having been out since early this spring, and obviously a lot of that time would have been off time anyway. There would have been 2 weeks in there where a lot of student athletes wouldn't have been on campus anyway because it would have been their post-semester break. Conditioning. You lost a fair amount of conditioning work. Football did a good amount of its conditioning, I'd imagine, in the winter before spring ball got cut short, but there still would have been some work involved, basketball as well, in terms of just staying in shape. And what you kind of worry about here is, on paper anyway, I obviously don't know the circumstances because everyone's circumstance is different, is every athlete had different access to different levels of resources. In basketball, for example, only X number of players, I'm sure, had access to not only a gym, but potentially a rim. I know that rhymes. That was pretty cool. In football, obviously you're not as facility dependent necessarily. In some cases, you are partner dependent. If you want to go out and throw a football around, you need a second person. But from a conditioning standpoint, everybody was kind of on their own, making the best of it. Obviously, the universities could provide a little bit of guidance, a little bit of communication, but ultimately it was up to what you had access to, what you were able to do to keep yourself in the best condition you could be in. And that was probably not consistent over everybody involved. So it's a situation where not everybody's going to be probably on the same level from a conditioning standpoint after this very unconventional spring. And I don't know if that's something where you can really make up for lost time. It's not like you can double time conditioning work. So that's going to be probably a challenge. That's going to be a question. The last thing you want to happen here, too, is to find out that, because guys were off on their own, they couldn't necessarily do a lot of the stuff that they would have been doing normally. They're going to come out in conditioning in day one and pull a hamstring or something. So your concern here, the question I would have, I guess, is do you really kind of taper into things? Do you go light, real early, and then build up into something more strenuous? That's probably how things are normally done anyway. But you're just so far behind in the process here that you kind of wonder how they're going to manage that kind of thing. In football, I think you can probably get into your weight program pretty easy. Well, I shouldn't say pretty easy, relatively easy, because you can probably manage numbers. That's a pretty large space. Cleaning things is probably going to be something there's going to have to be a pretty strict policy or protocol involved with. But you can probably keep things in relatively small groups, I would assume. This isn't a normal off season, but that seems like there are solutions there to be found where you don't have to have 60 guys sitting in each other's laps all the time as part of a workout. I am curious to know about large-scale conditioning work where there's oftentimes the whole team together, how that's going to work. I know they often go in groups, so can you do 4 big groups, or do you have to do 10 really small groups? These are all questions, obviously, I don't have answers to. I can't even claim to know exactly how Purdue does it normally. I'm going off of football context accrued many years ago, but I'm assuming very little has changed in that sense. In basketball, it's a little bit easier. You've only got 13 guys. It's not like they're always in herds, so to speak. But the thing about basketball is the NCAA allowed college basketball programs a few years ago to really have meaningful practice in the off season, to really have full, honest to goodness practices for X hours a week. I think it's like 2 hours a week or something like that. You can use that however you want, but there are legitimate practices going on in the off season. At what point in time that normally starts, I can't remember, but at some point in time in the off season, there's going to be that opportunity to have true, full college basketball practices. Whether you can do that at this point, whether you can have guys, having that level of physical interaction with one another, I do not know. That is going to be something that's going to have to get figured out too. Both situations, locker rooms. I mean, from a social distancing perspective, locker rooms are going to be something that has to be looked at carefully, I would think, if there are social distancing protocols involved in this. Again, I don't know what all is going into this. I'm more basically reading off to you questions that I'm going to have more than I'm giving you the answer to those questions, but that's kind of what comes to mind here. But the biggest thing for me in terms of questions and what I would assume would be challenges here would be conditioning, would be what sort of shape are these guys coming back to campus in? What sort of resources did they have access to? Obviously, we've covered the question of it's up to the individual to have worked, to have held themselves accountable for themselves without their coaches and their teammates around. So it's reasonable to suggest that this guy might have worked a little bit harder than this guy at times, but you were also at the mercy, too, of what you had access to. If you had access to a gym, a training facility, whatever else it might have been, you had an advantage. If you just were able to run around the block or you had a couple free weights at home, you were at a disadvantage. And these guys have state-of-the-art facilities at Purdue. They have state-of-the-art weight training infrastructure, and not having that for this period of time, however long it's been, obviously they missed out. And what shape they come back to campus in would probably dictate just how much you can get done right away. But there is obviously a gap there, and how you close that gap, I don't know if you can. But that's one of the big questions I have in terms of how you kind of manage a roster where your guys aren't all going to be in the same place from a physical perspective. In some cases, a situation that they could control. In a lot of cases, a situation that they could not control. So, as I said, we're gonna try to follow up with Purdue here and see if we can get answers to those questions eventually. Wanted to give it a couple days because there might not be answers to those questions yet. So that's kind of what I got for today. I don't know how interesting that was, but that's what I came up with. That seemed relevant because that just came out on Friday. It will be, obviously relevant moving forward because Purdue is now into its summer program, preparing for seasons that you still don't know what they will look like. So the return to activity here in June is one answer to one question, and with every answer to every question that comes, only come more questions. So this will just lead us to the next question, which will obviously involve what exactly is the season going to look like that these football players are preparing for, to a lesser extent because of the calendar. What exactly is this basketball season that these basketball players are preparing for? Obviously, soccer and volleyball will face the same questions as well. So that's what I kind of got for today. That has been your goldenblack.com Daily Quarantine Simulcast for Tuesday, June 2nd. I appreciate you listening, appreciate you watching, and remind you once again, this has been brought to you by Fox Purdue Bookstores, Purdue Federal Credit Union, the 6th Street Dive Restaurant, First Source Bank, East End Grill, and the Charters Team Remax Ability Plus. If you don't have dinner plans for tonight, I have a recommendation. The East End Grill, 6th Street Dive, Arnie's, Bruno's, Triple X, or the Whitaker Inn. They would love to hear from you, and I would love to hear that they heard from you. So thanks, everybody. We'll talk to you again tomorrow.